Hi, this is Black Krishna or BK from manfulwars.com, where I'm promoting polite patriotism to help nice ladies and gents teach kids to be, help us all look, walk, talk, and feel great, and to help us locally discuss and share great online info offline as better people making better places to live. A lot of online stuff, there's a lot of censorship, people are stuck in digital ghettos talking to like minds, and so there's sort of different species of civilian, confused civilian, and pissed off patriot out there, and connecting those groups is going to be really important moving forward. So see manforwars.com for more on that. But this video is called Iran and the House of Islam versus the House of War. What could possibly happen, right? As we all know, this is in relation recently to U.S. President Donald Trump ordering the killing of Qasem Soleimani, a feared and respected and reviled and loved Iranian top general who was responsible, apparently, for many attacks around the world and on American soldiers outside of Iran. So his job was not just to defend Iran, his job was to conduct with his forces operations outside of Iran, and therefore that made him a target, especially in light of the attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Iraq, and then the retaliation, and then various little tit for tat skirmishes back and forth going on right now that could result in, who knows, what could possibly happen, right? Um, Now, in fairness, and pundit Alex Jones from Infowars.com, now 20, 25 years in the game, he noted that recently that Trump can really piss us off, and really pissed off Alex Jones, who's a big Trump supporter based on him being a patriot and a nationalist. Um, that people can get really, really pissed off whenever any acts of war are carried out by the American government against other countries, especially in light of the endless wars with the war in Iraq, going on twice, once in 1991 when George H.W. Bush attacked, and then in 2004 when George Bush Jr. attacked as president of the United States, and the war in Afghanistan now dragging on for 19 years. So people are sick of endless wars and endless deaths and endless loss and loot and treasure and all the corruption associated with it and so on. And so Alex Jones was really pissed off at Trump, for example, for bombing some chemical weapons facilities in Syria after there was some alleged gas attacks. But at the same time, that was a limited strike. And Trump often does that. He'll talk tough a bit, he'll act tough a bit, and then he'll pull back and negotiate, just so the other side knows that he not only talks tough, but he also acts tough. So that doesn't mean he wants to do it more and more and take the superior American military might and use it to destroy places or invade places and bomb places or occupy places and send American troops over there to stay there forever and ever. He actually he actually, in fairness, when it comes to the attack on the bombing of the sort of empty chemical weapons bases in Syria, he'll actually do things kind of surgically and strategically. So, in the best case scenario, this was Iran. You had some proxies attack our embassy in Baghdad, and so we, took out one of the top leaders of your military who are responsible for sending proxy armies out to commit acts of war or terrorism or whatever outside of Iran and destabilize the Middle East. So it could be a limited strike negotiation tactic. Let's not get into World War III because I'll go there, so you don't want to go there, so let's not go there, right? And there is the peace through strength Trump doctrine, which has to be considered as part of it. So definitely not in favor of this type of thing, violence, war, whatever. But when it comes to complex geopolitical situations and countries formally engaged in conflict or countries informally engaged in conflict with their proxy armies or funding different rebel groups, it's not quite as simple as, can't we just be nice to each other? There's a bit more nuance when it comes to negotiating this area. So I'll say that first. And then I'll get into an article that I saw at a great site called whatdoesitmean.com. whatdoesitmean.com. Now, this is a pro-Trump, pro-conservative, pro-American, pro-Christian Russian website. As I said, all that pro-Trump, America, Christian, so on, Russian website, right? So you might be like, well, the Russians, we're supposed to be scared of the Russians. Don't they control Trump? Aren't they always trying to get us? It's like, nah, not really. I mean, I'm sure they're up to some stuff, but not that much stuff, or we'd have a lot more knowledge of that stuff and news about that stuff, especially when they're supposed to be demonized. So really, they're not that much of a major player internationally. When it comes to this, they still are involved. Don't get me wrong. They were in Syria. They helped eliminate ISIS in Syria and prop up the Syrian government based on what we know. They've done stuff in eastern Ukraine and so on. They're involved, and they have relationships with countries around the world, including in South America and so on. So and they've got negotiations with China. They're part of the BRICS coalition: Brazil, Russia, India, and China. That is supposed to be a counterweight to the G7 Western coalition of nations and so on. So Russia's involved, but at the end of the day, one thing Russia does not want, I believe, is they do not want a war with the United States. Why? Because they would get their asses kicked, and it could possibly lead to the destruction of the whole world. So when it comes to the population of Russia, a country with an economy and a military much smaller than the United States, and so on, there might be some people there, just like there's some neocons in America that want war with everybody, and there's others that don't. There might be some Russians that do, but by and large, I think the Russian government does not want that. And so whatdoesitmean.com is a great website, because what they do is they take certain parts of Russian intelligence reports, and they take those Russian intelligence reports and they do a lot of their own Googling or whatever the hell they do over there when it comes to their intelligence and search and apparatus and so on. And they put together alternative narratives about what's going on. And they've got a lot of stuff, on their website at whatdoesitmean.com that you won't find other places, right? They've got photos you'd never see. They've got SVR, the Russian intelligence service, surveillance photos of people that are published on whatdoesitmean.com. And yet, they're still pro-America, pro-West, pro-Trump, pro-Christianity, pro-nationalism, pro-populism, pro-freedom, pro-democracy. They are that type of website. And so I recommend whatdoesitmean.com. Don't be scared off by the fact that they have some Russian associations, because there definitely are some Russian propaganda arms that take it easy on Russia and demonize, other groups like RT, Russia Today. They do a much better job of criticizing other governments than they do of criticizing Russia. But, and they are the Russian state broadcaster, Russia Today. But at the same time, whatdoesitmean.com is a great resource for people in the West and people worldwide to get a deeper perspective of what's going on. And comparing different news sources, I've found them to be people that have given me a deeper understanding, both from a current and historical context, on a variety of political and, in some cases, cultural and social issues as well. So that's a high endorsement of them. And there is whatdoesitmean.com and their whatdoesitmean.com banner. And yet, at the same time, I'm going to take you to this article about Iran and give it a bit of context myself. It says here, from January 4th, 2020, America seems not to know that war with Iran is impossible. Islamic countries simply don't exist. There's the headline of the article, and it goes on to make the point about what could possibly happen when it comes to escalating conflict with the Middle East, because unlike war with other countries, you're not just dealing with a country, you're dealing with 1 billion people, or 1.5 billion people, depending on who's counting, right? And so I'll get into this article. It says here, by Sorcha Fell, and as reported to her Western subscribers. It says here, a thought-provoking new Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or MOFA, report circulating in the Kremlin today, the Russian Parliament discussing an official statement released by the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran, stating that, quote, the deputy head of the Hashed Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis and head of the Quds Force, Qasem Soleimani, were killed in a U.S. airstrike that targeted their car on the Baghdad International Airport Road, said this gravely concerning event, prompting Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Russian Foreign Minister, to call and remind his American counterpart, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, that, quote, the assassination of Soleimani violates the norms of international law. A reminder followed by Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova warning that Soleimani's assassination, quote, would only escalate regional tensions and make life worse for millions of people. A fact apparently not known by the American people reading such headlines as, quote, fears of all-out war grow after U.S. kills Iran General Qasem Soleimani, and, quote, World War III proof, horrifying reason Trump's Iran raid really could spark global conflict. And it says here, a war that could never occur because Iran is not an actual country, nor are any other so-called Islamic nations, all of whom present borders, rulers, and governments are imaginary Western constructs. So, I'll stop there for a second, and then I'll get back into it. But, one of the real concerns, when it comes to this type of conflict is the idea that, okay, so you killed one of our top generals? Fine, we'll feel free to kill one of your top generals. Maybe we'll assassinate Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, or the Minister of Defense or Secretary of Defense for the U.S. Army, Mark Esper, or somebody like that, right? They will just go tit for tat, back and forth, and we'll just pick him off while he's, having dinner at Swiss Chalet or something, right? And so, there are some real problems when it comes to this. However, at the same time, there are some real problems when these people are up to bad stuff anyway, and so what can you do, right? And as I said at the start of this video, there may be some little tit for tat, don't push us there, because if we go there, then we'll destroy you going on as part of this process. And the threats of war with Iran is something that is out there in the mainstream media, and it's a legitimate concern. You don't have to be pro-Trump and pro-whatever and say, nope, whatever he does is great. So what? You should be legitimately concerned about this. But you don't have to be totally anti-Trump and say, this is guaranteed to start World War III. We're all going to die. He's such a bad guy. Neither of those is accurate, right? And yet, in the polarized political realm that we live in, you're often asked to take sides. You're either 100% for him or 100% against him, when in reality, conflicts and situations are often a lot more nuanced than that. So I'll get back to this article, because it says here, a war that could never occur because Iran is not an actual country, nor are any other so-called Islamic nations, all of whose present borders, rulers, and governments are imaginary Western constructs, and in reality sees them all being a part of what the Islamic faith itself calls Dar el-Islam, a term describing all Muslim peoples as one nation not bound by borders, that stands opposed to those countries which do not have a treaty of non-aggression or peace with Muslims called Dar el-Harb, and were forever enshrined in Islamic law during the Umayyad Caliphate in the 7th century, thus creating a world that for the past over 1,300 years has seen Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb being locked in perpetual war, with the objective of Dar al-Islam being to force Dar al-Harb into a state of Dar al-Ad, a designation for peoples and or nations that have a treaty of non-aggression or peace with Muslims. That last such example in history being the Armenian peoples, who were the Dar al-Ad of the Islamic Ottoman Empire in the early 20th century, but upon the outbreak of World War I, saw the Armenian people breaking their Dar al-Ad agreement by taking up arms against the Islamic Ottoman Empire, thus turning the Armenian peoples into Dar al-Harb, whom the Muslims then slaughtered by the millions. And so this is one massive run-on sentence by whatdoesitmean.com. And yet there's a ton of hyperlinks here to back up what they're saying, as you can see from this example. And I've checked many of them before. I found many of them fascinating, many of them providing a lot of context. Because when it comes to articles like this, especially mainstream news articles or newspaper articles, they can just say a lot of crap, but a lot of it isn't sourced. But when it comes to whatdoesitmean.com, a lot of these ideas are well sourced. And so what I meant when it comes to the title of this video, Iran and the House of Islam versus the House of War, what could possibly happen, is for the last 1300 years, if you were not part of the House of Islam and you didn't have a specific treaty that you negotiated with the House of Islam, then you were the House of War. And it was the responsibility of Muslims worldwide to make sure that they converted you. Because if you didn't believe in God, then you're scum. God's not happy with that. So we got to convert you or we got to kill you. And that's been it. And when it comes to the formation of Islam, right? You know, I've got some theories about this myself based on a generic understanding of what's going on here. And basically what it seemed like is it seemed like the Europeans were more organized, right? The Europeans were more organized. The European colonial imperialist powers were more organized in terms of their countries, in terms of their, you know, city states and so on, towns and whatever, armies and all that sort of thing. So 1300 years ago, they were more organized and they could achieve more internally in terms of building up civilizations. They could achieve more externally in terms of trading with other countries or in terms of going to war with other countries, in terms of expanding their territory and sending out explorers and armies to conquer. So the Europeans were really organized, as history has shown to be true. And then when it comes to the Middle East and the Arabian Desert, they weren't that organized, right? Now, there were some organized cultures there. They did come up with some, important developments in history and math and science and architecture and so on. But there was also just a ton of warlords and Bedouins wandering the desert looking for food, looking for water, looking for a place to hang out for a bit until the food and water dried up, and then wandering off to look for more, right? So they weren't organized the way the Europeans were. Many people in the Middle East were nomadic tribes. They were wandering around the desert. They were fighting with each other over food and water and territory, and they weren't really getting their ish together to make sure that they could build themselves up and they could either trade with or conquer other territories and countries and lands and peoples, right? So Muhammad comes along, and Muhammad goes, whoa, slow down, hold on. You know what? You can talk about interpretations. Maybe God told him to say this. Maybe he thought of this. Maybe all religions are like that, where you can come up with different, or an alien, intelligent design, or, who knows, what the hell, right? But the point is that Muhammad said we can't just wander around the desert, eating and drinking and fighting with each other. We've got to organize together. And so he came up with the Islamic faith, with the Muslim faith. And that organized people around a belief system with a bunch of rigid rules. It made the men more empowered. It made the women less empowered. But that can make the men more empowered, as long as they're empowered to take care of them. Then the women can whatever. And it's not perfect. I don't believe in the burqa, but that's a fairly recent thing. I don't believe in a lot of the Sharia law and all that sort of thing, right? But as an organizing principle, right, it does make sense where you have the guys like, nope, we're in charge here. We're badass dudes. We take care of things. We make sure we're cool. Everyone here's cool. Where we live's cool. We're good, right? As opposed to, well, no, we should be more like girls. Yeah, hey, girls, like, we can do anything guys can. That's it. We're going to join the army. How many push-ups you have to do to be in the army? You got to do 50 push-ups. I'm a girl. I can do like 5. Well, we have to let you in the army anyway, so let's just lower the standard for push-ups to 5 instead of 50, right? That type of thing weakens cultures, and that's what's going on today, right? Where there's not a uniform standard. And you got some 6'8", 300-pound monstrous muscly chick who wants to join the army. They're like, great, glad to have you. Pick up a sword, stab that guy. But the point is that he came up with some organizing principles for the what then became the Islamic world, and he rallied people around Islam. So that's my theory in terms of how Islam started, right? And we know that Muhammad took something from the Bible, from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, from whatever. They still have some respect for Jesus, right? They still have a lot of Christian-like or Jewish-like values and traditions. And they basically said, okay, so that's what the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament said, and here's what the Christian Bible, the New Testament said, and here's what we're going to do. Excuse me, when it comes to writing the Islamic Bible, the Quran, and we're gonna come up with our own thing based on their thing, but with some changes for regional or political or cultural reasons, right? Or for reasons that we think this works better and this is more empowering. So that's where I think a lot of this came from. And the point is, as part of that philosophy, that's why it's such a warlike religion, right? Because at the time, they weren't organized, they were fighting with each other, and what Muhammad did was Muhammad organized them to fight against everybody else. And so that's what's been going on for the last 1,300 years, right? And there's a couple of maps here, which shows the expansion of the Muslim world from 900 to 1700, right? And it's Dar al-Islam, zone of submission, Ottoman expansion, and then Dar al-Harb, the zone of war or house of war, and it shows how they were expanding across Europe and Africa and the Middle East and Asia and Russia and so on, right? So there's that, and then all the stuff in the orange is the house of war, which means, oh, you're not Muslim? You think we're wrong? Screw you. We got to fight. Unless we come up with some treaty to say we don't have to fight, then we do have to fight. So that's what this article is making a point to say when it comes to the risks of war with Iran, because it's not just war with 80 million people in Iran and the country of Iran. It could be potentially, if enough Muslims and Muslim leaders see it this way, it could be a war with the entire nation of Islam, not the black guys in the U.S., but the Islamic world, and that's a billion and a half people. And there's another map here showing the mass killings of Armenians from 1915 to 1917 around World War I, which is also known as the Armenian Genocide. And it's over 2 million Armenians were allegedly killed, and this is because they turned against the Ottoman Empire and the Muslims in World War I. So there you go, and I'll put a link to this below as well. But back to this article. It says here, according to this report, only by knowing the indisputable fact that the Islamic faith has divided the entire world into Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb, or the House of Islam and the House of War, can the full implications of the American assassination of General Soleimani be understood. An understanding that begins with knowing who Soleimani was and wasn't, and whom most certainly was not the top general in Iran, as that distinction goes to Iranian Defense Minister Brigadier General Amir Hatami. And this goes through a few different Iranian figures, which people who know this well would know, or the Russian intelligence services would know for sure, and they probably communicate with them. So Soleimani was not the second in charge of Iran, as is popularly reported. He is actually much lower than that, and that is important to know. The mainstream media trying to attack Trump and trying to make this the worst thing ever because he did it. If Obama did it, it'd probably be celebrated, which has happened before when Obama did a lot of the similar stuff when it comes to assassinations and bombings and drone strikes and so on. When they were behind Obama as a globalist, they were endorsing it. But when they're attacking Trump for doing something similar as a nationalist, defending America first against globalism, now they want to make it seem like Soleimani was more important than he actually was or is or was in the Iranian hierarchy. So that's why a site like whatdoesitmean.com is handy, because it can be like, wait a minute, everyone in the mainstream media is telling me he was the second most powerful, military leader in Iran. But this website with a bunch of hyperlinks is explaining, no, he's not the second most powerful military leader in Iran. He's a little bit lower than that, right? And I'll get into it here. So, an understanding that begins with knowing who Soleimani was and wasn't, and whom most certainly was not the top general in Iran, as that distinction goes through Iranian Defense Minister Brigadier General Amir Hatami, who was followed by Commander-in-Chief Sayed Abdul Rahman Mousavi, the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran army, and its over 420,000 military forces, and under whose direct command is Brigadier General Aziz Nasirzadeh, who heads the Islamic Republic of Iran Air Force, and its over 37,000 military forces, as well as Rear Admiral Hossein Khanzadi, who heads the Islamic Republic of Iran Navy, with its over 20,000 military forces. So that is who is in charge of the army in Iran domestically. Now, let's get to who Hosseini was, or Soleimani, Qasem Soleimani was. Distinctly separate from the aforementioned main military forces in Iran and their commanders, this report continues, is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and its commander Major General Hossein Salami, whose roughly 125,000 military personnel are scattered around the ground forces of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, commanded by Brigadier General Mohammad Pakpour, the Navy of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and commanded by Rear Admiral Ali Reza Tangziri, and the Aerospace Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, commanded by Brigadier General Mohammad Bagir Kalibaf. The reason Iran has two distinct and separate military force structures, this report explains, is because of the two wars they are fighting. The first being waged by their main military forces against Western aggression, and the second being the Revolutionary Guard Corps war against Dar al-Harb, the main tactician of whom was now assassinated Major General Qasem Soleimani, who commanded the Revolutionary Guard Corps unconventional warfare and military intelligence operation known as the Quds Force, and whose estimated up to 20,000 forces were never fighting on behalf of Iran, but on behalf of Dar el-Islam and against Dar al-Harb. So, putting all that in a nutshell, and there's a bunch of hyperlinks, you can check yourself to verify or, how you feel about this. And there's Soleimani's send-off. Basically, there are Iranian military forces that are fighting to protect and preserve Iran and maybe screwing around the world a little bit. And Qasem Soleimani, his specific role was to fight for the House of Islam against the House of War, which is everybody else, which is the West, which is Europe, which is Africa, which is Asia, which is whatever. And so that's why his killing is so key, right? If Trump can kill him and say, look, the Muslim people, the Iranian, the Persian people, they're good people, they're great people. I have many Iranian Persian friends myself. They're wonderful people with wonderful families. They're businessmen, they're doctors, and they're lawyers. And we love the Persian people. We support the Iranian people. We hope they overthrow their radical government, their hardcore Islamic fascist Ayatollah government. We hope they do, right? If Trump can say that, and Trump can say, you don't need to fight on behalf of Islam against the whole world that isn't Islamic. Instead, you can make peace internally, and you can make peace with other nations, and you can do whatever the hell you want because you're Muslims and you should be able to, but you don't have to attack everyone who's not, right? Trump can say that. And part of killing Soleimani might have been that message. To say, look, we're going to take out the guy responsible for attacking with his 20,000 troops compared to the 500,000 or so in the regular Iranian army. We're going to attack the guy whose job it is to attack everybody who's not Islamic. Now, Iran, don't do that stuff. Otherwise, we're cool. Chill out. Relax. We got a bunch of Iranians in America. They're good people when they're not forced to be bad people or support bad people. So don't worry about it, right? So that might have been part of the message of attacking Soleimani, right? And that is why that's why this whatdoesitmean.com article is so important when it comes to adding context to all the news about what's going on when it comes to Iran and the assassination and possibly World War III, right? That's why this is so key. Is he wasn't just attacking, he didn't just kill somebody who was defending Iran. He killed somebody who was supposedly responsible for attacking everybody who wasn't Muslim and trying to conquer or convert or kill them. So back to this article here. with every Western intelligence and military leader knowing full well that General Soleimani was waging a Dar al-Islam war against Dar al-Harb, again, the House of Islam versus everybody else, the House of War. This report notes, it made him both reviled and untouchable, most particularly because to kill him would enrage the entire Muslim world whom he was fighting for, a fact brushed aside by a small team of President Trump advisors who began planning Soleimani's assassination shortly after Christmas, an assassination carried out by an advanced modified Hellfire R-9X Ninja missile, while Soleimani was an invited guest of the Iraqi government. That was followed by the U.S. government ordering all of its citizens to flee Iraq as fast as they can, an actually wise move, as Soleimani's assassination has been declared a, quote, U.S. war crime against Muslims by Yemen's Houthi Ansarullah movement, who are now joined by Muslims in India vowing revenge on both the U.S. and Israel for Soleimani's death, and because of, caused the U.S. and its allies to suspend their training of all Iraqi forces. So I'm going to add some context to this, right? Basically, the people that believe in this model of the House of Islam and the House of War, they're going to be furious about this. Furious about this. The people, including Muslims, who do not believe that Islam has to be at war with everybody who's not Muslim until you conquer, convert, or kill them, then you can just go, you know what? Don't worry about it. We understand. That guy was responsible for trying to conquer, convert, or kill everybody in the world who's not Islamic, who's not Muslim, right? But we don't need to do that. We want to be Muslim. We believe in God. If you try to make us not Muslim, we'll kill you. But we don't have to make you Muslim. We just think you got it wrong. And if you want to become a Muslim, we've got ways to help you do that, right? So that's what's going on here, right? And when it comes to the people that they cited, and there's hyperlinks for all this, by the way, as I said earlier. When it comes to this, let's examine who was mad at Trump and said, this is it. This means war with all of Islam, right? Well, first of all, Soleimani was an invited guest of the Iraqi government, so that's not good, right? When if Canada invites somebody to Canada and then Trump kills him, then it's Canada's responsibility to make sure he's not killed. So we look really bad, right? And just like Iraq looks really bad when America feels free to kill somebody from Iran who was invited to Iraq, right? So, but it's complicated because of what he was up to, right? Including attacking American forces supposedly as part of the understanding of him. So that's one thing. And the U.S., just announced they're leaving Iraq, to let the Iraq government. This might have even been a plan to leave Iraq. You say, well, if we do this, Iraq will be mad. We want to get out of Iraq anyway. So we killed two birds with one stone. We killed Soleimani, a guy who was responsible for attacking us and destabilizing the region. And we have an excuse to leave Iraq now because they don't want us there anymore if we're going to assassinate people they invite to their country. So, there's all this geopolitical 3D, 4D chess going on as part of the great geopolitical game. It's been going on since the British Empire days, right? And Trump still has to play it. You unless you're anonymous on 4chan or 8chan, you can't just do and say whatever you want. When you're really dealing in the real world with real stakeholders, this is the type of deal sometimes you have to make. So that's on the Iraq situation. Excuse me. Now, he says here, this is a U.S. war crime against Muslims, Yemen's Houthi Ansarullah movement declared. Now, there's a war going on in Yemen right now, which is not covered much, but the people who cover it say it's just awful. It's just awful. Saudi Arabia is backing some militias or insurgents or rebels or terrorists, depending on how you look at them. And the U.S. is backing Saudi Arabia by selling them military weapons, which they then send to Yemen to kill Yemenis. And then there's other people involved in Yemen who are fighting against them, trying to prop up the government. Yemen is a big mess, right? And so for a group in Yemen to say this is a crime against all Muslims is something that they might feel because they're angry at Saudi Arabia and America, and they want to get the whole Muslim world to be pissed off about this. However, for other Muslims who don't want to fight against the whole world when it comes to them being Muslim and other people not, and we have to fight until everyone is or everyone's dead, they might be like, not really feeling that, not really feeling that idea. So I don't think this is a crime against all Muslims, right? So it's not black or white. It's a question of choice. And this is partly what Trump might be saying to the people of the Muslim world. It's like, look, you can't attack everybody until they're Muslim or they're dead. Cool? Great. Relax. Let's trade. I love dates. I love dates, for dessert. I love Islamic stuff. I love it's beautiful architecture, wonderful people, beautiful women. My God, at the Trump beauty pageants, we've had some of the most beautiful girls from the Middle East, right? They're so beautiful. Even if you cover them from head to toe, you just see their beautiful eyes. They still drive you crazy, right? And so he might be saying, look, we're going to do this to stop that House of Islam versus House of War, and if you don't do that, then we won't bother you. We won't attack you. We won't invade and occupy your country, and we won't keep fighting with you, and you won't keep fighting with us. So this could actually be a brilliant strategic peace move when it comes to Trump. When it comes to what could possibly happen, could be World War III, or it could be the end of 1,300 years of the House of Islam versus everyone else, the House of War, right? So and so there's a couple of, when it comes to who's talking about this, it's good to have some context for that. Because this guy says this is a war against all Muslims, doesn't mean other Muslims, feel that way. And that's really what's going on in the Muslim world right now. And it says here, back to the article, as the world holds its breath over what is coming next, this report concludes the supreme leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, gave these fears a direction to look towards with his warning. Quote, the U.S. must await tough revenge, unquote, and saying that, quote, the cruelest people on earth assassinated the honorable commander who courageously fought for years against the evils and bandits of the world, unquote. It was followed by Iranian President Hassan Rouhani stressing the fact that Iran and other free nations of the region, quote, will take revenge on the gruesome crime from the criminal America, unquote, but whose warnings filtered through the words of Iranian ambassador to the United Nations, Majid Takht Ravanchi, clearly points to where all of this is heading. And while acknowledging that Iran and the U.S. have exchanged letters through a Swiss emissary after Soleimani was killed, and there's a hyperlink, they're talking after this to make sure they don't act too crazy, stated, quote, there will be harsh revenge. Where, when, how, I do not know, but there definitely will be some retaliation, unquote. And as one would expect, being said by the Dar al-Islam to the Dar al-Harb, as this over 1,300 years old war lumbers on with no end in sight. Now, you can't take all these statements at face value, right? You have to do this. You have to talk tough, right? If you're the leader of a country, you can't be weak. You can't be seen as weak by your own people, by the rest of the world. You have to talk tough. Every leader has to talk tough, right? Even Kim Jong-un in South Korea, right? Leader of or North Korea. He's got to talk tough, He's got to talk tough to keep his self-respect, to get respect from others, to show he's prepared to act. But when it comes to what he actually does, you haven't seen the leader of North Korea actually attack South Korea, attack Japan. They'll get pissed off because they're negotiating with the U.S. and they're like, no, we don't want to give up everything. We want you to give us this. And Trump will be like, okay, here's $1 billion in aid. No, not good enough. We'll destroy Japan. Okay, here's $2 billion in aid. And back and forth, right? And so when it comes to Iran, of course they have to say they're going to retaliate, right? When Trump came out on TV in a press conference and said, we just killed one of their top generals, right? A terrorist guy who killed many people and attacked American forces and destabilized the region, but we killed him. So it's not like Iran can say, okay, but Iran also does not have to attack and say this means all-out war with our 500,000 forces against America and the West and everybody, and all of their allies. That doesn't have to be it. It could be, you blew this up, so we'll blow that up. You blew this up, so we'll blow that. You killed this guy, so we'll kill that guy. And then after a few weeks or whatever, it just kind of simmers down. And people forget about it, move on to other things. And the news cycle spins so fast that this is not a big deal, right? Just like, as I said at the beginning of this video, I talked about Alex Jones being super mad at Trump for bombing Syria, then later realizing that's all he did. He didn't even say he killed people. Like he said specifically, I don't want to kill people. I'm bombing these factories or these warehouses with weapons in them, and I let them know that I'm going to bomb them. And then we bombed them, and then nobody was killed except a bunch of stuff was destroyed, and you have to clean that up, and it's a big mess and might be a little dangerous. But it wasn't an attack on Syria that launched a new war. It was one that was a showing of toughness, a showing of what he's prepared to do, a showing that he is prepared to fight. But if you don't want to fight, then that was that, right? It's like arguing with somebody back and forth before you go to full-on fisticuffs, right? This is a geopolitical version of that. So I think it's an interesting and brilliant strategy. It could lead to World War III, or it could lead to peace with the Arab world forever, right? And it's a pretty brilliant strategy when it comes to those options. So it depends. If they think this is an attack on the Islamic world and every Muslim in the world has to fight because this one guy was killed, even though he was reportedly, a leader of some terrorist organizations whose specific job, or military/terrorist organizations whose specific job was to do stuff outside of Iran and promote Islam that way, as opposed to attacking somebody whose job was only to defend Iran and the national sovereignty and territorial integrity of that country. That would be a little bit different, right? If you've got an American general whose job it is to screw around in Russia, in China, in Canada, in Sweden, in the Philippines, and you're like, look, your guy is screwing around all over the world, so we're gonna kill him. That's a lot different than an American general whose job it is to just protect the U.S., right? That's an attack on the U.S. as opposed to an attack on a guy who's, generally speaking, attacking people around the world. And there is a crucial difference in that. And so it ends off here with a quote, and it says here, Muhammad divided the world in two sectors. One he called Dar as-Salam, House of Peace, and the other Dar al-Harb, House of War. All countries where Islam is not the ruling authority are Dar al-Harb. It is the duty of the Muslims to wage jihad in Dar al-Harb, overthrow the governments, and force people into submission. This is the only kind of peace that Islam recognizes. And again, this is an organizing principle that Muhammad came up with way back 1,300 years ago to say, we got to get our shit together. And to make us so strong together and unified, we are going to say it's us against the world. And a lot of people do that. Sports teams do that. Kyle Lowry, Toronto Raptors point guard, talked about going into Brooklyn to play the Brooklyn Nets just yesterday, right? And talked about how he got into some skirmishes on the court, a couple of flagrant fouls or flagrant foul, a couple of dirty plays, people the fans getting on him, right? And he went crazy in the fourth quarter, scored 16 points, and he was talking all sorts of trash and blah, 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 blah. And the Raptors won the game. They turned from losing the game early in the Raptors versus Nets game when it was Toronto Raptors playing in Brooklyn against the Brooklyn Nets. They were down early in the first half and so on by like 15 points, and it looked like it was going to be a blowout. Raptors have a bunch of injured players. Nets have a few as well, to be fair, but the Raptors have a bunch of injured players. They're playing on the road. They're getting their asses kicked early, right? And then they come back. By the end of the game, it was a 20-point blowout. By the end of the game, it wasn't even close. The Raptors beat the crap. They went from getting the crap beat out of them early in the game to, by the end of the game, beating the crap out of them, right? And then they interviewed Kyle Lowry after the game and the Raptors broadcast. And they said, hey, Kyle, it seems like you got a little pissed off there. And how do you do so well on the road? Because, a lot of players play well at home. You got all the fans cheering for you and you get your confidence from them. But then on the road, a lot of players don't play. But you seem to play even better on the road. You seem to be like, screw everybody. We're going to do this. And Kyle Lowry said, oh, it's us against the world. When we go on the road, it's us against the world. We're going here. There's 20,000 fans. And so, it's us against the world, right? So, that's a common rallying thing to do, to say us against the world. You've got T-shirts out of Detroit that say Detroit versus everybody, right? And so the people of Detroit, yeah, Detroit versus everybody. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And other cities have copied that that idea. It is a unifying idea to say it's us against the world. However, it doesn't mean you have to actually attack the world, right? And so that's where the traditional understanding of Islam as an organizing principle to say it's us against the world, those white Western European colonizers, traders who keep going all over the world and taking more territory and conquering people and so on, we need to organize against them. That might have been true 1,300 years ago. But now, 1,300 years later, it is not necessarily true to have an adversarial approach when it comes to us against the world. And so when it comes to the House of Islam versus the House of War, maybe Trump set it off. Maybe he threw, as Joe Biden said, a match into a tinderbox or a can of gasoline and it exploded. Right now we're all going to be dead in the next 5 years because this ongoing conflict between 1.5 billion Muslims and 6 billion other people is going to rage. Or maybe he went, don't do that anymore. Cool. It's been 1,300 years. You can do everything else except for attack the rest of the world. Cool? And that's an option too. So anyway, I'll put a link to this article below in the links. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, share, get in touch with questions, answers, ideas to work together, or financial support. All that stuff is needed to grow this channel and so on. And feel free to use any clips that you'd like from my videos. If you think they help, repost them or chop up any clips to use in other videos or whatever. Let me know if you'd like, because I find that stuff flattering and interesting and it helps build relationships. Or just do whatever on your own, because I don't want to bother people. I respect people. I want people to respect me. And so I don't want to trouble people unduly when it comes to that. And there you have it. Black Krishna or BK from manforwars.com. Hope this helps, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.